I'm going to talk a little bit about the very violent aspects of right-wing violence, right-wing extremism that we have here in the United States. Not in a Me Tooism, one-upism, but because it's significantly greater threat than the Antifa scenario that was just discussed. Could we get my... I want to present two things to the committee. This chart, and we'll come back to it. I want to give the witnesses a chance to discuss it. But I believe it's the blue, shows left-wing extremism, and this is obviously 100%. These are killings and incidents, and this is from 2013 to 2022. As you can see, with respect to the incidents, the red part of the donut is right-wing extremism, and we'll talk about what that means later. But it's almost, from an incident standpoint, the entire circle. Then with respect to the killings from 2013 to 2022, 3/4 of it is right-wing extremism. So that's not to say that there's no left-wing extremism issue or that there aren't solutions that we should take or steps that we should take to address them. But it is to say that from a standpoint of violence and the risk of death to citizens here in the United States, right-wing extremism is a greater problem. You put those down. I wanted to back up and talk about sort of the roots of this, and I'll come to these issues with the left in a moment. But of course, the largest act of homegrown terrorism is the Oklahoma City bombing. I think we lost 168 civilians in that bombing. That was Timothy McVeigh acting in conjunction with two others, I think Terry Nichols, I forget the name of the third gentleman. But he decided that he was upset about the Waco issue, and then two years later to the day, he put a bomb inside a truck that he designed from fertilizer and drove it into the Oklahoma City federal office building. I think it was the second floor of that building had a kindergarten and daycare in the bottom. So many of the deaths were to children. I saw some of the clips of people who were survivors of that bombing. I think some worked for the IRS, some were just federal people who worked trying to be public servants and help their community. And they were really unconnected, uninvolved, had no relationship with the Waco scenario at all. But it certainly set a gigantic tone because we've had a lot of right-wing extremism that's tried to imitate McVeigh or followed along the ideological tracks that he laid out. In fact, I believe it was Mr. Nichols was connected to the Michigan militia, which was also connected to the same group that tried to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and we've had some discussions about that at previous hearings, but I think it's clear that that was an effort to kidnap her, and I think apparently to assassinate her. And that was based on their views with respect to COVID, feeling that she'd gone too far in imposing COVID restrictions. And so I think we have to be sure that we sort of separate out that sort of violence, those sorts of threats, from what we've got witnesses who we'll talk about today. I'm particularly wanting to mention this. I think Kerry Watkins, who was the director of the Oklahoma City Museum, that is a memorial to the bombing site, says that from that sacred ground, we have to work to find common ground. Otherwise, we cannot begin to address these problems. I think that the common ground has to be data-driven, that there has to be a focus on the significant causes of violence and right-wing extremism. And I think from a Homeland Security standpoint, it's important for us to focus on what the roots of that are so we can try and disrupt that. We had a hearing here a little while ago about disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. I'll just say false information just to summarize it quickly. But it's clear that a lot of the young men who get involved, and there's almost always young men, in committing these kinds of acts, buy into various types of disinformation and misinformation. I want to chat about a couple of them real quick. Some of you may recall the Atlanta attacker from March 2021. He fatally shot 8 people at different spa locations. I think 6 of them were Asian women. And he had to drive to to find the 6 to kill, he had to drive, I think it was 8 miles to get to the 3 different massage parlors. And he said, "I'm going to kill all Asians," was the quote from that statement, from that event. With respect to, I'll just do a couple of these instead of going through all of them because we don't have time, but El Paso, August 2019, the alleged attacker killed 23 people and injured numerous others using a recently purchased semi-automatic rifle. Another issue we need to talk about, the ability for these guys to buy usually AR-15s and go out and commit these mass attacks, even if they shouldn't be able to get them, even if they're under the age of 21, is another issue that I think we need to address, in addition to recognizing mental health issues. This guy expressed support for the attack on mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. Some of you may recall that that was another ideologically driven attack that spawned several others here in the United States. This guy said the response was to the, quote, Hispanic invasion of Texas, close quote. The manifesto encouraged others to conduct similar attacks and said the alleged attacker was a, quote, white nationalist, close quotes, trying to discourage Hispanic immigration to the United States. Let me skip ahead to a couple more. Charlottesville. I think we have a tape on Charlottesville. Can we play that?
Jews will not replace us! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
So this gentleman, James Fields, drove a car into a crowd of people. This was at the quote unquote Unite the Right rally. You saw a little clip of some of the things that they were chanting at the front end of that. I gotta say, this was a wake-up call for me. When I first heard the chant, "The Jews will not replace us," I had no idea what they were talking about. In fact, I thought I was mishearing because I'd never heard the concept. But this is the replacement theory stuff. That animates many of these individuals who go out and commit these killings. And it's carried out in multiple ways across lines that connects these gentlemen up. You know, the piece I saw on Timothy McVeigh said that he tried to recruit people by going to gun shows back when before he committed his crime, but he wasn't able to do it. The big difference between McVeigh then and the connections now, especially between the white nationalist, white supremacist crowd, is that they don't need to go meet with each other. They just go on the internet. And the internet is an instantaneous connection that links them up and shares the same ideology that motivates a lot of this activity. I want to hit one last one of these before I stop, and then I'll make a quick comment going forward. But in doing research for this, I came across something I'd never heard of, but apparently is a very serious problem that I really think this committee should look at. It's called incel, and what that's short for involuntary celibacy. And this is a group of men who are imitating a guy named Elliot Rodger, who has the philosophy that men should be able to have sex with women of their choice at any time that they want. And many times they go out and they've been killing people. This guy, Elliot Rodger, who spawned this, killed 6 people and attacked 14, stabbed 3 to death, and he also used an assault weapon as well. He tried to go to a sorority house near the University of California at Santa Barbara to try and target these women. The bottom line for me on this is that, and I think there's a good hearing that we need to have on this issue of ideological violence in the United States. I don't mean any offense to the witnesses at the table, but this isn't the group to do that with. Ms. Gaines, I respect your position. You've snapped back at me on a couple of things on the internet, and that's fine. And I think college violence is important. but it's not really the same type of issue that we should be talking about here, I think. I mean, my university president, Chris Eisgruber, addressed the Stanford issue directly and gave solutions to how to fix it. I think that's an important issue that we have to have, but I don't think this is really the topic to cover it. And Mr. Erickson, I appreciate your testimony and your experience. I hope that when you testify, you'll give some of the background. I think, for example, in your testimony, you said something about there been Antifa is responsible for dozens of deaths. I hope you'll have a chance to be more specific, or maybe it was Mr. Rosa, I'm not sure, but I hope one of you all will be able to be more specific and talk not only about at least what deaths we're talking about, but the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. And most importantly, what are the solutions for trying to address this? So I hope that we'll be able to get to a point where we can use the Homeland Security Committee to address Homeland Security problems and try and meet the root causes of this issue so we can push back on it. And with that, I yield back.